Professional, thank you. So we're able to think about 6 things at the same time. How do we do that? Because I don't need to tell you right now that you're a son, and you're a father, and you're a husband, and it's daytime. You know them all at the same time, and you're aware of them all at the same time. So you can hold these 6 thoughts, these six facets of reality, all at the same time, be aware of them in a super conscious way, and to the degree that you own up to those realities, for example, to the degree that a guy owns up to the reality that he's married, and he sees his entire world through that lens called marriage, his decisions will be a lot more based on how can I help my wife. But sadly, if a guy is not really with that truth, then he'll just do selfish things. Or if he's not with the truth that I'm a son, and therefore I have appreciation for the ones that brought me into the world, even if they're crazy. You should know the Gemara says that even a person's parents are crazy. Say that 5 times fast. Thank you, you did much better than me. You still owe them honor their whole life. There's details on how to actually do this, because we wouldn't be here without them. We wouldn't be here. Nothing would ever start. So just from the fact that they brought us into this world is a lifetime of appreciation. A lifetime of appreciation. The Gemara goes so far as they describe him like a rabbi, and he's speaking in front of the entire community. And the person's parent is not well, and he comes up while the person is speaking in front of the entire community. And the parent walks up on the stage, and in front of, everything okay? And the parent, the father, the mother, spits in his face and slaps him across the face and says he's a nobody. And at that moment, the son has to ask him if they want a drink of water. Is everything okay? And you might think, what? Come on. It's a lifetime of appreciation. And that's why it's one of the hardest mitzvahs. So to the degree that a person owns the reality that he's a son, that he's married, that it's day, whatever it is, he's going to be more in tune, and all his decisions are going to flow from that space. So we're talking about the reality of God's oneness. The more that a person lives with that oneness, that reality of God's oneness, the more all of his decisions are going to flow from that place. Why did we specifically go into this mitzvah? Because we're coming from the mitzvah of loving Hashem. Remember Rabbi Akiva? A couple weeks ago, we spent a lot of time with Rabbi Akiva. You guys remember? Rabbi Akiva gave his life. What happened? While he was being tortured to death, he was saying, Shema Echad, and at Echad, his soul exited from his body. And we explained that the ultimate love, this is how we got into this whole long section in the Tanya that we've been working on the last few weeks about God's unity. The greatest level of love is the love of returning to who you are, to returning to where you come from. The greatest level of love to God is when I return to the oneness that is God. I make that journey back to being unified with God. That's an amazing love. That's an amazing bonding. And that was the love that Rabbi Akiva was experiencing. We say that's what it means when the soul leaves this world. After it passes on, after 120 years, we should all live until 120. B'ezrat Hashem. After 120 years, though, the soul is going back. That's why the Jew says at the moment of his death, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And it's a moment of love as he's going back to source. He's going back to where he comes from. Now you know what it says? That the wicked people, when they leave this world, it's like pulling thorns out of sheep's hair. Does that sound pleasant and comfortable to you? No. Or like ouchie, like we say in my house. Is that ouchie for you? It's ouchie. It's ouchie, right? Like ripping the thorns out of the sheep's hair. It's like it's all tangled and mangled in there. Pull out all loose hairs. Yeah, it pulls out some stuff. Because when the sadly, the wicked one leaves this world, they're holding on to this world. They feel like, you know where I am, like who I am? You know who I am? My Louis. It's my Louis Vuitton, my Louis. That's me. That's me. And all of a sudden, when the soul starts dislodging from the body, and all of a sudden they see like, Louis. It's very painful because they're like trying to claw onto this world. Like, no. They think like they got so much identification that this was me. They thought that this is me. There's no problem with Louis. I don't know, is he a righteous person? I'm not sure. There's no problem with, as long as it's not Shabbos. Be careful. A lot of these designer brands are Shatnez, like Hugo Boss. Yes? Shatnez is a prohibition in the Torah that it's prohibited to put flax, we call linen, a linen garment, and mix it together with a wool garment. You may have heard of this prohibition. It has roots from the machloikis, from the debate between Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel. Is that what they call it in English? Cain and Abel? No. Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel. And the simple meaning behind not mixing it together is that there's certain things that God has asked us to do that we don't understand. And it's logical that you can't understand everything that an infinite God is asking you to do. If you could understand every single thing that God is asking you to do, that would be quite a lowly God. You could figure out God with your finite thought systems. What kind of God is that? And therefore, logically, there are parts of the relationship with God that have to be beyond intellect. Much of it is intellectual. But it's intellectual that there must be parts that are above intellect. That makes sense, right? That's like Purim. It's the funniest day of the year. It's the one day of the year that we do the most un-Jewish thing. We just go out of our minds.
You're wasted.
The whole, I don't know, wasted. That sounds a bit more like frat party-ish, which is not a Yiddish thing. We get spicy. So the Gemara says, you have to get spicy until you don't know the difference between blessed is Haman and cursed is Mordechai. I mean the other one. Okay? Till you don't know the difference. Now, you got to get spicy. That's not wasted. Wasted sounds like some of the keg stand, like Chad, the master bro, cheering you on. Yeah, go, Chad. Throw a touchdown, Chad. It's not our way. But the question still remains is, why do we do that? The whole rest of the year, we pride ourselves on using our intellect, using our brains. And then one day out of the year, we sort of like... Because you know what the answer is? For 364 days out of the year, every single thing is about a very clear, rational, intellectual relationship with God. But the Jew understands, and this is a gift that we're trying to share with all of humanity, is that God is rational. But rational moving into the infinity means there must be things that me as a finite creation won't be able to understand intellectually in a finite thought system. Therefore, I need to have one day out of the year which allows for the space to move into the infinite experientially, if you will. And that's rational that there should be one day out of the year. That an infinite God who loves us gives us a day out of the year where you move out of your intellect and into your superconscious. Okay, coming back down to us. The mitzvah, which is constant, that we're now developing, is the unity of God. We mentioned how to answer the heretics, which we spoke about for a couple weeks together. And then we mentioned that the essential flaw of the heretics, who may believe that God created the world, but said that what happened? He left. He was more interested in other pursuits. What was our essential response to them? How their entire thesis doesn't make sense. How did we respond to that?
Is that they're using their finite frame of reference to relate to an infinite being.
Excellent. They're using a finite frame reference, meaning they want to suggest that, you know, the way God made the world, he took a bunch of stuff and fashioned it, sort of melded it together, and then left, because he's not interested in us. Now, why do we say that's fundamentally flawed?
Because it only works if you make something from something, not if you make something
Correct.
from nothing.
It only makes sense if you say that the goblet maker, the silversmith, takes a piece of silver and fashions it into a goblet, that the silversmith can now leave. He doesn't need to be constantly giving attention to the goblet. But God, who's infinite, who's creating from nothing something, God's involvement in the world is necessary, because if God leaves, there's no world. God, if he withdraws his energy from creation, then the creation does not exist. Creation is only here because God is constantly willing it into creation. Okay? And then we spoke about how that relates. That's even more impressive than the splitting of the sea. And we gave details about that. Then we went on to an analogy, which we started yesterday, which we're going to continue now, which is that the unity of God with the world can be compared to the sun and its rays. Remember this analogy? You guys been thinking about it? Mm-hmm. Very, very important. This is this stuff blows your mind in a good way, without any use of illegal substances. The sun is called the ma'or, the source of light. The rays are called or. They're the light that emerges from the sun. And we said the existence of the rays are only there because they're coming and emanating out of the sun. And we said that if you look at a ray, you see it has an identity. Here, in this world. Now, does that ray have an identity on the surface of the sun?
No.
Well, let's say it this way. Is that ray shining on the surface of the sun?
Yeah.
Yes.
Certainly. If it's shining down here and it's far from its source, certainly it's going to be shining where it comes from. It's going to be shining in the place of its origin. That's if it can make it here shining, certainly it's shining there. Okay. But the ray, does it have any identity? Is it noticeable?
No.
When it's, so to speak, on the source? It's not. It's swallowed up into from whence it came, from the place that it emerges from. It's only, so to speak, that it left the surface of the sun that now it has some identity. Okay, you guys ready for this? The ray, though, if you block off the ray, if you block off its source, it's not continuing. We said like the laser beam. You shine a laser beam and you just like cover the laser beam. So you don't have a beam. The beam is one with the source, is one with the flashlight. It's like one extension of it. It's emerging out of it. By we I mean literally identity, literally creation, are the beams that are coming off the sun's surface. The sun is God. And it only appears like we have this separation, we have this self-identity. Like remember we talked about rays coming in from that window, another one from that window. I could call my wife up, oh, did you see that ray? Yeah, it was great. Nice rays coming in. That one, all the different rays, it appears like, oh, that's not this one, that's not this one. I guess they're separate. But if you trace it all back to its source, it's all from the one. It's just as the one shines forth, it starts to look like there's separation. But is there really separation? Or is it just an illusion? So in this world, in the analogy, by the way, this is all one analogy, creation. It's one mega analogy, one giant mashal for God. You're in this analogy. We're literally in this crazy analogy right now. In the analogy, the ray does leave the sun, even though it's completely one with it. but you could see it. In the reality, we're the rays of sun, but do we ever leave the surface of the sun? No, because we're inside the sun. Because there's nothing but God. You can't leave the face of the sun. But for the purpose of the analogy, we can kind of get how you could have that which emerges from the sun being independent, but not really. It's only independent if a guy is just totally, he's put sludge over his eyes. You know the way Rabbi Nachman says it? He has a famous thing. He says, there's this beautiful scene, this beautiful vista. I'm fishing for something here. The problem is he's having a hard time seeing it because he says he has like a nickel on his nose. It's like right there. So everyone's like, do you see that beautiful mountain? No, I don't see anything. I just see money. Just take the quarter off your nose. Because it was sitting there, it was blocking, he couldn't see it. Meaning it's right there. Just, we think that we are like these rays that have left the sun. We don't have any shaykhs to the sun. We could write a PhD on how God doesn't exist. The joke's on us. We are one with the sun at every single moment. And in the reality of it, we're one with Hashem in every single moment. We never left the surface of the sun. This is a very important analogy to just appreciate how much one we are. All of creation, all of humanity, every bit of creation is literally one. Chaim Miller has a beautiful way to say it. Look at this line. The light has no identity within its source. When the light is back on the sun, it has no identity within its source. Or in logical terms, an effect has no identity while it's still within its cause. An effect has no identity while it's still within its cause. As it's still a cause, it hasn't yet created the effect yet. The effect doesn't have the identity while it's still inside the cause. The ray of light has no identity while it's still on the surface of the sun. And that's the truth of all of reality. So are we separate from God? What's the truth?
God is one.
We're mamish one with God. But He created a world where it appears like the rays of sun have emerged off the face of the sun, and therefore it feels like we have separate identity. But that's the illusion of this world. Don't get fooled. The mitzvah of Yichud Hashem is tracing yourself back to the surface of the sun. Questions? Josh.
Decision making independent of Hashem.
Pardon?
We have free will. Like our decision making separate from Hashem.
Free will is a gift from Hashem that only exists because God gave this situation where we can make free will. Only because you have a separation, only because it's separation, only because there's a ray that I could think that I'm independent. Now there's a choice. I could listen to my Yetzer Hara, or I could listen. But who's giving me the energy to make the free will decision? It's all Hashem. It's all Hashem. There's nothing. Ein no milvadei. There's only you, Hashem. This is the mitzvah of Yichud Hashem. Okay, all of what we just said, you should think about when you say Shema. Every time you say Shema. And that's what we said. That's why the Baba Sali took him half an hour. Chod! Just go there. Just go there. If you're the Chazan, maybe, speed it up a little bit. Go like, let's go, Tehilas, we gotta finish up. Hashem emes, let's go. Okay, this is a major analogy that I want you guys to think about over the next day. We're going to build this up a little bit more. And then we're going to go to another analogy that the Balatanya gave us, a famous analogy of how God's unity is just wondrous and how we're completely inside of God. If people would like to prepare for this, because it's like mega stuff, I would suggest to learn the Tanya, Perek Chaf, and Perek Chaf Aleph. the Tanya, chapter 20 and 21. If you want to see some like mega, I don't like the word trippy, but we'll use it, some mega trippy stuff about God's unity. I guess that's the generation uses, like they can relate to that word. If I say like, an unbelievable, gewaltige, shefedike, yichudike, to trippy? Oh, yeah, trippy. Okay? We should be Zoicha Mamish to Mashiach Tzidkeinu V'mher V'yameinu. Amen. Amen. Have a wonderful day. Chapter 20.